Welcome to the Faithful and True podcast. Today we're happy to bring to you another legacy podcast going back to our days of the Men of Valor program with our host, Dr. Mark Laaser. Although Mark is no longer with us, we still appreciate and cherish the content, the wisdom, and the knowledge that Mark always shared with us on that program. Today we're going to feature a show that was called The Lies That We Believe.
And specifically, what Mark's going to be talking about are the lies that we believe about sex and the chaos that can create when we live out of those lies. So we hope that you'll enjoy this broadcast of the podcast.
Okay, so we're going to basically tie all of this to a passage which we've talked about quite a bit, Romans 12:2. Don't be conformed to the ways of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Now, a number of different times on the show we've talked about mind renewal and neuroscience, neurochemistry, brain health, and all of that. And I want to really emphasize in this series the first part of this, which is don't conform to the ways of the world. And to not conform to the ways of the world, I think we need to take a time out and ask ourselves the question, what in fact are the ways of the world, and what in fact are the lies that culture is teaching us about sexuality. So the one I wanted to talk about today, and we can, I think, maybe all get into any of our own examples of this, and one of the things that with this show that we often encourage is, for those of you listening to think about how you relate to this particular lie or this particular core belief, because some of what we're talking about here is distorted core beliefs that can be the result of these lies of culture. So the one that I wanted to talk about today is this very simple core belief that our worth as a person is based on our appearance, in other words, our attractiveness, and our performance. When it comes to sexuality, that our worth as a person is equal to our sexual attractiveness and our ability to sexually perform. So there you go.
Wow. And the thing that I'm struck by there is, first of all, your idea to even have this series, because I think we become numb to all of these cultural messages that are kind of, we're battered by them. And that goes back to everything from your stories about being in the drugstore and the front covers of all the magazines and the messages that are being delivered there, what we see on the television each night in the kind of messages being delivered there, even the advertising in our world today. We are bombarded with all kinds of sexual imagery to the point that after a while, are we even noticing? It becomes so commonplace.
Right. I was just thinking that, going through this season of time in my life where I'm having to take a little time off to, deal with treatment for this illness that I have. I've been at home in the mornings, and it's tempting to watch some of the shows that I've noticed at the nursing homes when I visited my father when he was still alive, and now Debbie's parents.
Are you up to date on The Price is Right?
Price is Right. I am really kind of clued into the Price is Right now. And what I notice about that is the same thing that I would have noticed even as a small boy when I was watching Bob Barker, is that there is really an emphasis on the models, on the attractiveness of the models. And a number of years ago, I was watching some news show, like the Today Show, I think, and one of those models that was kind of one of the historically long-running models was being interviewed about, their approach to the show and what they were trying to do. And for some reason, this one model, who was in fact, a very physically attractive person, she said, what we are instructed to do, what we try to do about all of these products is we try to imagine that we are making love to the products. And I said, what? It's like, that is crazy. So here are, all these various products that they're having people bid on. And when they're displaying these products, they are in, a very kind of attractive, seductive way.
You didn't think that a washer and dryer could be made to appear sexy.
Well, that's kind of the extent that some of these lies will actually go to. One of the new things that I've noticed is that they now have a male model. And whenever this male model is on the show, invariably, before the show is over, he is going to appear without a shirt on. Without a shirt on. So why am I picking on The Price is Right? I guess it's just my current cultural experience. But and here I think about all the people that are watching that show and all of that. But the idea, the lie, is that our value is based on physical appearance. And how far back does that go for all of us? When do we first learn that lesson? That's one of the things that I wanted to challenge the audience with today. How old are we when we start getting affirmed or, in the opposite, criticized about our appearance?
Right.
So I remember being self-conscious about these issues, even in grade school. And I'm sure that by the time we get to middle school, or in my case, junior high, we are consciously establishing, who are the attractive people, and who are the unattractive people, and we are teaching ourselves this lie that our worth as human beings is based on physical appearance. That's the first part of this lie, by the way, in this first show. I notice that a lot of times when we're talking about sexuality, the word performance also comes up, and that our culture has taught us that performance is a measure of sexual performance is a measure of whether we're capable, good people, whether we're a valuable spouse. I was talking to a guy yesterday who was simply saying that in his anxiety about getting back together with his wife, he was not able to perform. That's just a common term that we sometimes use. And I think that just goes to show you that we are obsessed with performance. And I'd much rather, this guy talk about were he and his wife able to spiritually connect? Were they able to emotionally connect? Much rather that than whether or not he was able to achieve, some sexual act. And it's like he was distraught and completely sad and in tears over the fact that he was not able to perform. It's like his self-worth is based on performance.
And all that in light of being bombarded by the TV and magazine ads for Cialis, Viagra, all of these male enhancement products.
Right.
Whether you want to see it or not, if you are a male in today's culture, you are bombarded with unwanted, unsolicited emails and everything about male enhancement and all of this kind of thing, with the presumption being that we are less than we should be.
Exactly. So you're right on there in terms of the advertising, the products, the so forth. And you were talking about men there with all of that. I think about how, in a way, women get objectified early on by, whether they are considered to be, physically attractive. I mean, we joke about it in high school and college. We rate people. We give them numbers. We do that kind of thing. And I think it's a tragedy, and it's a lie that Satan has convinced us of, that sexuality is more important than it really is. Before we close the show today, I want to make sure that, because I know we do have couples that are listening, and I really want them to have a conversation about their participation in this lie or this core belief. Because I know in the midst of recovery from sexual addiction, it's oftentimes really hard for a wife not to think, and this is assuming that the husband is the sex addict, of course, that her performance or her appearance or her attractiveness is the reason why he had to go elsewhere, whether it was simply to pornography or, other relationships. And that is a lie. I mean, their addiction is not about performance that way. It's not about the attractiveness of the wife. It's about a lot of other factors, which we discuss regularly on these shows. But I just want to speak against that. I just want to come against this satanic lie that our worth in a marriage, our worth as a human being, has anything to do with sexuality, period. Performance, attraction, whatever else it is.
Now that we know what the lie is and we've firmly established that, what's the truth that we can kind of think about in hopes of fighting this lie that
what's the counter reaction?
Yeah.
Well, the counter reaction is where does our worth come from? Our worth comes from the fact that we are children of God, that He intends to be in relationship with us. He has created us fearfully and wonderfully, regardless of our size, shape, color of our hair, our eyes, various other physical qualities. God loves us so much, wants to be in relationship with us, and considers us His sons, His precious sons and daughters. That is the truth. Our worth is more about our spiritual relationship to God and our spiritual relationship to each other.
So once again, with the old adage that beauty is in the eye of the beholder,
right?
You're inviting us to refocus our thought process. In evaluating isn't the right word, but if we are spiritually connected to our wife,
right,
to our partners,
right,
then your first reaction is not going to be a judgmental one. It's going to be a spiritual one.
Right. One of the great things that I've discovered about this, and I guess I'm guilty of talking about myself sometimes too much, but as Debbie and I, they're laughing because they're agreeing with me. But
Aaron and I we just exchanged a look with each other.
Well, I maybe sometimes too often use my own self as my own best example, but one of the things that I have found to be unbelievably fantastic is that Debbie and I have known each other since she was 17 and I was 18. So, she was absolutely beautiful girl, and I was totally infatuated with her back at 17, and so now we've been married for 40 plus years, and one of the things that I've noticed is that as we have consciously worked on our spiritual connection and our emotional connection over the years, that she has actually grown in terms of my perception of her physical beauty.
She's more beautiful today,
yes,
than she was at age 17.
At age 17. That is a bold statement, but in terms of my perception, that is true. Now, I won't even, because it's too personal, get into anything about sexuality between the two of us, but the fact of it is that sex, the quality of sex when it occurs between a husband and a wife is entirely related to how much they are spiritually connected. Mm-hmm. It has absolutely nothing to do with frequency of sex. It has absolutely nothing to do with variety of sex. It has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not finishing or orgasm is achieved. It has nothing to do with those physical things. Mm-hmm. It has everything to do with, do we enter it with that spiritual friendship and companionship and connection. As long as I'm out on this limb, I might as well stay there for a minute. But one of the things that has been happening, I mean, given my recovery from this disease I have, there are certain things that physically I'm not able to do, and other things that I am able to do. But every night, Debbie has, we've been sitting on the bed and we've been connecting before we go to sleep, and Debbie's been giving me a back rub, night after night for all of this time, and my back is getting a lot better, by the way, but it's it's been in some pain. And one of the things that I've noticed is that because we're spiritually connected, because I know our hearts are in this together and our hearts are to heal. There's something incredibly special about a simple back rub.
Right.
I mean, I contend in a way that it's more powerful in relieving the pain than the narcotics that I've otherwise been prescribed.
Well, you and I are both currently seeing physical therapists, and what you're describing is like a spiritual therapist.
That is right.
You are experiencing a level of healing through Debbie's touch that you can't buy that service. That's one right. that you can't go to get anywhere else. So you're just proving your point about the power of spiritual and emotional intimacy.
That is exactly right. And one of the themes of this series is going to be that we continually need to be looking at God's transcendent reality. In other words, what is God's idea for the connection, physically, emotionally, spiritually, of a husband and wife? And there is the world, the culture has no way of understanding this transcendent reality apart from God. And anything less is counterfeit. It's absolute counterfeit. And you can have sex with 1,000 different partners, and it's all counterfeit. Spiritual sexuality is God's intention. It's the transcendent reality of the gift that He's given to a husband and wife. We're going to continue this theme because I think central to our judgment of what culture is trying to teach us is the fact that the God's reality is about the spiritual love and Christ-like connection between a husband and wife. That is where sexuality is to be expressed, not out in public, not on film, lots of other things it's not meant to be. What happens to us when we perceive in culture? And let's be honest, radio, is one form of culture. There are so many other cultural outlets, from movies and television, music, now social media and so forth. How many times during a given day are we faced with explicitly very overt sexual messages, sexual images? And I would guess on a given day, if we ever took time to count it, it's probably at least 100 times. But what I'm really interested in, when we think about the lies that we believe, what is the lie, therefore, that we believe? Well, we believe that the whole world is out there pursuing sexuality. The whole world is engaging in sexuality. And I think one of the most devastating lies that comes out of this is that if I myself am not participating in this cultural revolution, this openness of about sexuality, then there must be something wrong with me. I'm being left out. That's the kind of the core belief underneath some of these lies that I wanted to get to, which kind of segues from our show last week that my appearance, my self-worth is based on my appearance and my sexual capabilities. If we think about it this week in terms of everybody is having sex is all around us, what are we left to believe if we ourselves are trying to maintain a higher sexual standard and we're not participating in all of this sexuality? I think the bottom line is that we feel left out and that we feel like we're less than, and we feel, when you think about the association that we just talked about between sports and sexuality, I must be less than a man if I'm not interested in all of these things. The other thing that we were talking about is I think sometimes we Christians, we sit on our hands. We have been accused of being puritanical. We've been accused of being repressive. We have been accused of being self-righteous, and therefore we get a little afraid to stand up. We get afraid to speak. We get afraid to talk about this. We get afraid to state that no, it's not okay to be randomly sexual. It's not okay to objectify, tons and tons of women every day. To think about this for a moment as we get to that transformation of the mind part. Part of the consideration is as we transform our mind, as we transform our thinking, as we grow in maturity, what is it to be a man? What is it to be a real man? And by the way, I know I'm talking right now primarily to our male listeners. I hope that the ladies of our audience know that we're trying to also speak to them in terms of recognizing on our part as men that it is totally adolescent, totally objectifying, to get into some of this stuff. So, but as men, I think we really need to understand what is God's intention for us, what is God's calling to us in terms of being real men. And real men do not take advantage of women. Real men do not have sex with every possible woman they can. Real men do not objectify the appearance of other women. Real men are committed in, if they're married, in one marriage. I could go on with that. We've talked about that theme any number of times. I think it's a change in attitude about what it's like to be a man, what it's like to be masculine, what it's like to be strong. And those are the ways that we actually find, I think, true fellowship with Christ. And we need to find fellowship with other men who believe the same thing.
That's what I was about to say. The man that you are describing is the type of man that I want to hang out with.
Yeah, exactly.
It isn't these other guys, and I think that you have so hit the target with your observations there. That's the impression I get. They have this burning desire to be one of the boys, and if they thought, if they were strong enough or man enough to stand up and say, you know what, this is really adolescent. Behavior. We really don't think like this. That would be refreshing, but I think that they're too afraid to think that they're not macho enough if they don't.
Well, I think, as we're talking about it, as I'm thinking about it, I think some of this, I know for myself, goes back to some of the call it woundedness of childhood, where I was the preacher's kid, and the preacher's kid sometimes was made fun of because I lived in the preacher's home, and the preacher's kid and the preacher's home and the preacher, were not part of normal society. They were extra special. I remember friends of mine at times saying, we can't tell Mark that particular joke because he's the preacher's kid. Well, so we all want to be like real men, and I think what we're talking about today is our perception of what is real masculinity. And real masculinity is not about random sexuality.
Any closing thought that will wrap this up any better than you have already?
Well, I do think that kind of where we're landing up is that is just for our listeners to consider the idea that even though culture is representing to us that everyone out there seems to be having sex, that if you object to this or if you find a problem with this, you're a prude, you're a Puritan, you're repressed, then I think we Christians need to stick together in fellowship around this and stand up for what real men and real women do. So I would just say be of good courage, find fellowship with other believers, and talk about this. I think one of the things that I think we all need to do more, like we're doing today, is just talk about this, expose it for what it is.
Thank you for joining us today on this legacy presentation of the Men of Valor program that we're presenting here on the Faithful and True podcast. We always cherish these opportunities to again revisit some of the wisdom and knowledge and personality of Dr. Mark Laaser. We hope that this podcast has been meaningful and beneficial to you. And we hope that this coming week, it's going to be a week for you that's filled with many blessings and with great vision.